Hi everyone, this is Thomas Newth from Tenable. I'm the head of product marketing for cloud and identity, and today we're going to talk about the hype behind cloud security and taking a practical approach to taking in security insights from the latest cloud and AI trends, and how we do that here at Tenable. So before we jump into the source material, that's a lot from our research team that's really informed our product division and the way that we've innovated our approach to cloud security, is recognizing some of the gaps. So one of our core missions here is to optimize workflows and bridge gaps. And there's three main problems that we see over and over, and that's the gaps along the pipeline, from redundancies between AppSec or cloud security and vulnerability, GRC and SecOps. You see ASPM tools in IT. Sometimes you're going to see some folks call this AST. The takeaway here is, like a exposure management tool that capitalize on cloud security, IT and DevOps are trying to reconcile vulnerabilities in code. And with cloud security, that's a big issue. So this is a big trend, but it's also a big gap that exists between personas and tools. And this is curated, or I guess you could say it's continued with the issue of shift left in practice versus just kind of in word form. So guardrail implementation, is security able to actually use AI trends to recognize risks in the code to cloud or application to production pipeline early on the process and put those guardrails in there effectively? And then there's, the attack path with remediation gap. CDR or classic ops is a big trend, but it's also very isolated. So we get these great mappings of attack surface or attack path mapping, and with remediation recommendations, complemented by AI, but they're not really concrete. Sometimes they're not actionable. And that's because there's no technical context with everything in mind. And so we've innovated our products and our tool set and our push to cloud security under the Tenable One exposure management view, so that our customers get unified vision, unified insight, and unified action, whether it's an ASPM, whether it's early in the cloud pipeline, or if it's through production into CDR. And that's why you'll see this diagram a lot built around exposure data fabric, where you're normalizing, contextualizing, and correlating the risks wherever they might be. Now, for cloud security, it's going to be like, hey, where are my secrets, vulns, misconfigs, identity, and public exposures, and can I action them early in the process, in app development or AppSec, or in the DevOps space or SecOps space as well, all the way through the pipeline to CDR. And so our approach here, from analyzing the trends as a company and really trying to solve these problems with data, is our approach to research and finding a demo where we want to illustrate trends and actually being able to action them from data exposure, secrets, toxic combinations, other risks, all the way through securing identities and securing data to remediation. Now, if you checked out the cloud risk report, I think this is a great thing to cover here early on this process, because it covers a lot of these trends that might be, I should say, overshadowed by what actually is happening in business case reality. What we found actually with this cloud risk report is that 9% of accessible storage has sensitive data, and 97% is restricted or confidential. So basically, these pieces of data are already marked confidential and restricted, but still 9% of it is exposed. So tagging accurately does not always equal security. Also, over half of organizations with ECS task definitions have a secret in at least one of them, which really shows that even though we are approaching the secrecy of this, with some due diligence, the exposure is still there. And nearly 1/3 of orgs still have at least one toxic cloud trilogy or combination of risk. That's going to be a vulnerability with maybe an over-permissioned person in your organization in a multi-cloud environment, so that they can move laterally, for example. So, for example, this vulnerability might be accessible to multiple clouds or PII. Now, when we look at this in a different way too, what does this actually mean for us? What is it? Almost 10% of accessible cloud storage has sensitive data, even though 90% of this is marked restricted or confidential. That just shows that resources that can be accessed without authentication or permission requirements need to have an added level of security on them. That's why cloud identity entitlement management is so key, but also JIT, just-in-time access, so that permissions are only provided at the time that a task needs to be executed on. So you're reducing that blast radius, and you're able to monitor high-risk actions a little bit more with higher scrutiny. The other key finding or trend is around secrets. Now, secrets are credentials used by human or machine to access sensitive data systems. But in today's cloud environment, these include API keys, access keys, encryption keys, and tokens, in addition to traditional username and passwords. Now, what we found is a lot of this interesting data that, over half of organizations with AWS, ECS, task definitions have at least one secret in one cloud resource. This is nearly 30% of AWS EC2, over half of GCP Cloud Run environment variables, and a third of Azure Logic Apps workflow configs, and almost 10% in infrastructure as code. Now, this is really interesting to us. The takeaway here is that these should be valued higher when we look at toxic combinations of risk. So toxic cloud trilogies, or percent of organizations looking at AWS and GCP environments, we saw that 30% of orgs have at least one toxic trilogy or combination, with 9%, which is 9 points down from our report last year. So the trend is improving. We're looking at, and we can see that cloud security solutions are reducing the amount of toxic combinations that organizations have, but it's not moving nearly fast enough. That's a takeaway here. A toxic cloud trilogy is a cloud workload that is publicly exposed, or, as I mentioned earlier, critical vulnerability with a high privileged access right, creating high risk attack path that is a prime target for bad actors. So even though it's down from 9% last year, the degree or the amount of cloud applications that we're creating, we can actually look at this as actually an expansion of the attack surface. So, if we're looking at 30% of 1,000 versus, down from 40% of 1,000, and now that 1,000 has actually gone to 5,000, it's a bit compelling. It's a bit deceptive. It's something that really needs to be considered for organizations trying to reduce their attack surface. Now, key finding number 4, and other findings that I want to really put on the radar that I think are informing trends here, is IDPs help, but they don't guarantee security. In our findings, over 83% of orgs using AWS have configured IDP service, which is a best practice, but still 77% of orgs are setting up Vertex AI Workbench and Google Cloud, misconfigured at least one notebook with an overprivileged default service account, and 70% of cloud AI workloads contain at least one unremediated critical vulnerability. So this IDP workload is a best practice, but it is showing itself as a trend of false security. So that's why identity entitlement management are even more so important. And that's our approach at Tenable, is that we have these redundancies here and we attach it to an overview, a unified view of risk under the Tenable One exposure management platform. I think it's been a controversial topic. This is the macro trend here as to why exposure management, or sometimes SECtember, continuous threat exposure management, are terms that are growing in popularity. And these data insights from our risk report and what I'm talking about right now are the reasons why SECtember, or exposure management, has really kind of taken a popular area in the lexicon of in the security world, and why Tenable has been a long believer in that. And so a few things that we have done to address these trends is to really expand the reach of risk prioritization everywhere, including the cloud. And the one way that we do that is AI-informed VPR variable. So vulnerability, our vulnerability risk measuring system, that's prioritization risk score. We did this initially for on-prem and Kubernetes, but now we've expanded it to the cloud as well. You're going to able to go beyond CVS and CVEs over time and really see the contextual implications of alerts and vulnerabilities in the cloud, for example, informed by a toxic combination or trilogy. You can also see over time how a vulnerability has been addressed within an organization. These are a few great detailed threat factors that you're able to look in over time, and that's a great way that our customers are addressing real-time trends and basically exposure to threats across their whole ecosystem. And the other thing that I've mentioned earlier, to basically circumvent the risk that's still born with IDP, and to go beyond identity and entitlement management, is reducing that blast radius, that exposure to the risk that you have from the get-go. And one way to do that is just-in-time access, or JIT. This allows you to identify, then communicate, and then implement on a rolling basis. It minimizes your exposure by granting access to actual amount of time needed to complete a task. Enables developers to make quick requests and notify approvers. And you pretty much can enforce zero trust within your cloud environment and monitor user activity during this process as well. It's a great way to address the rising trend. And then also, it's important to talk about the other side of the coin, which is entitlement management or identity and entitlement management that we've rolled out to cloud as well. This is provides unified access level and custom policy improvements in the product itself, so you're able to really control your cloud resources and the entitlements within your cloud environment. Over time, though, we're going to expand our entitlement capabilities in the product. Short term, we want to make sure that we have API requests so integrations can happen with our customers. We have over 300 bidirectional data flows already. Then longer term, we want to bring that into like SailPoint and ServiceNow so that just-in-time access is accessible everywhere. We talked about some of the trends from the risk report and how we address them with some key features and advances. And now I think it's really important to show practical steps to address and reduce the risk of these trends here from an ecosystem view of risk. And that's what we do at Qualys here with cloud security, but also as part of exposure management. So as you can see, the pain that our customers are facing is siloed security tools, increased alert fatigue, fragmented risk signals everywhere, which contributes to operational inefficiencies and risk prioritization gaps. This is a huge problem and trend that we've observed within the cloud security because cloud is just one part of your attack surface. Yes, it's growing very fast, but it needs to fit in the overall ecosystem. The way that we're addressing this is just a unified view, and the AI-informed VPR that we covered in previous slides, as well as AES and ACR ratings. And you can see in real time how this actually works. We're able to see our full ecosystem view. You immediately see organizations' risk exposure across the board, how the organization is faring against predefined industry benchmarks, and then you can start brokering it. You can look at your cloud exposure, but you can also look at your exposure elsewhere, like web application scanning and vulnerabilities. You can explore cloud security scores to determine what is impacting your organization most, and you can drill down really quickly to see your similar organization's overall exposure score. You can see how your cloud security exposure score fares against predefined industry standards benchmarks as well, and track yourself over time. You can see how cloud security is changing your exposure management and risk posture over time to see progress reports. You can gamify this by a G-distributed group or organization. And additionally to that, you can also set, view, and examine remediation service level agreements or SLAs and metrics so to further gamify your organization. And you can do deep dives as well as to see your progress over time to reduce that mean time to respond. So with that, the trends that we're really seeing obviously within the organization today are centered around elevated risks surrounding the expansion of AI and data utilization, as well as a false sense of security tethered to IDPs, underpinning the greater importance for CIEM, Cloud Identity and Entitlement Management, but also going a step further to see how you can actually control identity and entitlement management in the cloud, but in the context of your greater organization. If you want to explore more about how we are addressing this at Tenable with Tenable Cloud Security, as well as Tenable One, please feel free to click the demo and learn more.